Please welcome back to the show the Chief Scientific Officer over at the wellness company. That is Dr. Peter McCullough. Dr. McCullough, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you.
It's good to have you, as always. And speaking of Trump 47 putting together his cabinet, obviously after what was just it's amazing it's already been a week. I can't believe how fast this week went since the election. But, of course, having you on, I have to ask you about Make America Healthy Again and RFK's role and all that. Do you have a specific role that you'd like to see RFK take on? Where do you see him most beneficial to President Trump? Let's start there.
Well, I'm watching what looks like an NFL draft on steroids here. It just there's just one team selecting, and people just join the team. It's been tremendous, and we'll have to see how things work out. Now, remember, in the public health sector, we take care of patients who are Democrat and Republican, the entire spectrum. So, we don't want public health to be potentially as political as some other areas in the cabinet. And so for that reason, for Health and Human Services, which is Medicare, Medicaid, NIH, CDC, NIH, FDA, we want somebody who's going to be able to work with people of both political leanings in those agencies, but at the same time, realize that the pandemic has called for a sweep of corruption out of these agencies, for sure, and then a sweep in terms of individuals and their philosophy, much more for public safety and much more, for the interests of the individual as opposed to the interests of big pharma. So I think RFK is going to play a big role. Now, he's a disruptive force, and whether or not a disruptive force takes a cabinet position or is a key advisor, we'll have to see. Other disruptive forces you can see, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy will be in like a new capacity. We'll probably find out very, very quickly. I'm behind whatever's being done right now because I think the whole nation feels that we're finally getting back on track.
Yeah, and to the point you said about watching, it's like an NFL draft. I read something earlier in the night. A girl said that same thing. She said, "I've never seen anything like this. It's like people are paying attention to this like it's the NFL draft, and what's going on here seems like it's almost not normal." But whatever you think about it, what you have to agree on is that people have woken up. People are awake and paying attention right now. Yeah. So let me ask you, obviously, if you took every kind of sector, if you take about border or you take about immigration, you talk to people, they'd say, okay, well, here's the first two things I want the president to do. So when it comes to Dr. McCullough and you look at this administration, are there two, if you could talk to President Trump, are there two things that you have at the top of your list that you'd like to see him tackle when it comes to, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry? Or what would you advise him on tackling first?
Well, I think a big ticket item certainly is the COVID-19 vaccines. Now, the current ones on the market, they're not FDA licensed. They're back to emergency use authorized. Biden ended the COVID-19 vaccine emergency years ago. Nobody in America thinks we have an emergency. COVID-19 is like the common cold. So the vaccine boosters are not clinically indicated. They're not medically necessary. They've had great safety concerns with injuries, disabilities, and deaths. And sadly, the people who are, in a sense, forced to take them are children in order to fulfill the vaccine schedule and go to school in so many states. So I think the government should really convene leaders in academia. We certainly need Pfizer and Moderna, Novavax at the table, the CDC, NIH, FDA. We need, a safety review. This can be done even before the term starts. And then a really strong leader in healthcare to have everyone at the table understand they're coming off the market. We don't want anybody who's a stakeholder to come back and say, wait a minute, I wasn't involved in this. But if they all understand they're coming off the market for the reasons I outlined, I think America would be overjoyed. I know people in the healthcare field, we'd be thrilled to see them go. And then after that, people have, interested in vaccine safety have said that the liability shield should be removed from the 1986 Vaccine Injury Compensation Act. And so the companies would have to stand behind their products. McCullough Foundation just has a tweet out in the last few minutes about transgender and more data about transgender care increasing mortality. and we pulled in President Trump's former statement on this. He said that, listen, this is gone now, out of Medicare, Medicaid. We're not going to have, we're not going to have children subjected to this. He's made some really strong statements. Down in Texas here, Attorney General Ken Paxton is actually now on his third doctor that he's suing for violating our ban on transgender. So I think adding protection for children, this theme of protect the population and public health, protecting children from the harms of transgender should be up there as well.
Getting back to the vaccines, I totally hear what you're saying, but I feel like that's one of the spots where the president, I haven't heard the president take a firm stand. I mean, he always talks about the vaccines in a way where he seemingly still talks about them in some positive notion, not necessarily with what the final product was that we're actually putting into people, but that we did a great job in doing this. We did a great job in getting them. We did a great job at cutting the red tape. We did a great job. We don't ever get the credit. Wouldn't the president have to somewhat pivot on his kind of former beliefs on that, which I haven't seen him likely to do to achieve what you're laying out?
Yeah, the one hint he dropped was on his interview with Cheryl Atkinson in the last month or two,
yes,
where, she, confronted him on the vaccines. And he said, listen, I'm not a doctor. There are people on both sides of this argument. And he said, but, more data will come to bear certainly next year in 2025. And he may have been foreshadowing on having some very detailed, well put together, but rapid safety review that finally is enough to swing everybody and pull this off the market. So I don't think he has to unilaterally make the decision. He's not going to do it, but it'll be a data-driven decision. I think once all the stakeholders are at the table, it won't be hard for a good leader to say, listen, I know how badly everybody wanted these vaccines to work, but it just hasn't worked out. They have to get off the market.
We're speaking to Dr. Peter McCullough, of course, the Chief Scientific Officer over at the Wellness Company, where you can go twc.health/voice, twc.health/voice. Do you have any concerns between now and the inauguration day? Obviously, as we head into the end of the year, we're heading into flu season. How can people prepare for this time of year? And do you have any concerns between now for the American people between now and January 20th when we get a new administration?
Well, we're having a pretty mild fall so far. Rates of influenza, COVID-19, we're certainly not seeing surges in clinical practice. So far, so good. People should be prepared. They should use good oral and nasal hygiene. There's a variety of nasal sprays and gargles now that actually help people prevent colds. They should get in the habit of using them. We spent a lot of time on them in our Substack Courageous Discourse, xylitol-based products for prevention and then acute treatment, iodine-based products. But I think that's been the biggest change for me is I don't wait until I start to get sick. I am using, a nasal spray or gargle preventively every day, and it's wonderful to be free of having colds. Wellness Company provides some great kits to handle, acute flu, COVID-19, other forms of respiratory illnesses.
Finally, Dr. McCullough, if could President Trump by himself, or does he need Congress here? Do we need legislation? How do we tackle the idea or the problem of our reliancy on medications from overseas, from China, from other places? Is that something do you think a president can tackle? How do we get off being so reliant on our prescription drug supply in that whole chain of command? How do we tackle that?
It doesn't take Congress. Under previous administrations, effectively the Chinese undercut American manufacturers. In Rosemary Gibson's book, China RX, she lays it all out there. China now controls the original ingredients, and most of the drugs in the drug supply, even if they're put together in India, they are, coming from China. I think through HHS and the Department of Commerce, we can identify the drug supply as a national security issue and start to have, government, public-private partnerships in having, original manufacturing of key pharmaceuticals come back to the United States, particularly certain generic products that we rely on every day. Well more than 90% of all the drugs I prescribe in practice are generic. So it's not a big pharma issue. It's really a national security issue.
Very interesting. Dr. McCullough, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for all the great work you continue to do. We appreciate it.
Thank you.